I put a post up on LinkedIn about your book. I got it right here, right? So it's really in my hands. I've read it. But there was a lot of people that wanted to learn a little bit more about what the book details are. And I just thought
Yeah.
it was way better to just get it right from the author's mouth in terms of what's in the book. So I'm I'm Brian Ilg. I am in a different field than you, sales, right? I'm out here talking to people and businesses all the time about technology challenges everywhere from phones and tablets to governance and all of those things. So your book is about system failure. Tell me and everyone else more about you and your background because you bring all the sauce to the table.
Yeah, absolutely. So my background has really been in technology in a lot of kind of different capacities. But today I run a company called Digital 520, and we're a global consulting firm for AI governance, security, and privacy. So big part of my focus is on how do you make AI safe and responsible, especially in high risk and regulated industries, right? Because I think that's where a lot of the governance conversations kind of currently live. So I do a lot of research and publications and different things kind of to that end and speaking at events and kind of awareness building type of things. But my day in and day out is getting to work kind of on the front lines of a lot of these systems with companies and organizations and governments across the globe that are trying to figure out governance from the ground up.
And that is such a complicated space. People at the most senior levels of these organizations are challenged just figuring out kind of the structures. How do we build those policies? How do we defend ourselves? What does failure even look like? Right. A lot of these are
Right,
brand new
right.
systems and applications of new technologies that have materially changed the landscape of everything, so to speak. So when I heard you were putting the book out, because I've gone through your textbook a little bit. It's long, right? It's about like 500
It is.
pages. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Little
I'm not gonna
nighttime
claim that
reading,
I read
right?
that one all the way through. But I'm aware of the framework that you put in there, the 5-layer data framework. Do you want to talk just a little bit about that? Because I know that's really important and like foundational to what's in the book.
Yeah. Governance is an industry that is filled with lots of different frameworks and a lot of them seem really disconnected. And how do we possibly comply with all of these different frameworks? And so, internally at Digital 520 as we're consulting with clients for years, I've been trying to kind of figure out how do we make this super super simple? And the result of working with a lot of those clients and having a lot of those conversations is this 5-layer framework. And so the base layer is the data governance layer. And layer 2, we have model governance. And layer 3, we have system integration governance. And so if we just look at those 3 layers, what we're effectively saying is governance starts from the bottom, right? And this seems intuitive, but today we see governance approach the opposite direction a lot of times, right? It's coming from a regulator, it's coming from some form of litigation, and it's flowing from legal team back to compliance, back to engineering, back to data. And we're looking at governance the opposite direction, saying if you have an issue in your data, you can't possibly govern your model well, right? The issues from the foundation will always pass through. And so those are kind of your 3 pre-deployment layers. How do we get our data right, our model right, and how do we integrate it safely into the business? And then post deployment, we have layer 4, which is control and monitoring, and layer 5, which is audit and evidence. So each layer is kind of answering a different question, right? Like the data layer is answering the question, is the data safe to learn from? And the audit and evidence layer is answering the question of can we prove all of the above? So can we prove that we watched it in production, that it was safely integrated into the business, that the data was non-biased, that the model was trained fairly? And so these layers build on each other. And for companies that are looking to figure out where do we start with AI governance, the answer is always data.
Mhm.
But the catalyst for AI governance is so often that top layer, right? The audit and evidence. We have an audit, we need the evidence, and now we're kind of reconstructing everything. And so the companies that are in that spot are approaching governance kind of late. And unfortunately, that's where I get a lot of phone calls, right? And it's much harder to respond to those incidences than it is when we talk about governance kind of by design, right? In the development process when they're first looking to deploy AI. And that's what I think, you really bring to kind of those sales conversations is we're looking to buy the hardware. We're looking to kind of get started with AI and bring these AI native hardware solutions into the organization. How do we do so safely? Right. And so you're really, I think, maybe not using the framework in the same way, but still looking at it kind of from that ground up type of approach.
Definitely. And the way I look at data is it's information moving through business and between people and systems.
Yeah.
That's like telecommunication, right? So we talk about phone calls and the words that are said and how that's now being transcribed and moving through CRMs and all that fun stuff. So I have that kind of sales
Right.
perspective, but I I also really understand from the audit lens how challenging it is to actually even perform an audit if you don't have everything organized and structured right from my time at Babbel and learning with that organization, kind of what they were in there doing. Again, really high
Yeah.
risk audit assurance type work. So we spent a lot of time just explaining what to do. So I know this is a really needed new skill set or knowledge set for decision makers. So I really do want to dive into the book itself. So again, it's called The Model Is Wrong. I'm going to get it right here. And what does it say? Stories from the front line of system failure. So I know in the book you do a nice job of explaining like these are not real example, but they are drawn from that frontline experience that you have. And I think you have what, like 8 or so use cases in there.
Yeah,
If I'm,
exactly.
yeah. So there's 8 use cases, and they really go through a lot of different scenarios and system failures, and really do a great job of explaining what happens across the entire, what I look at as like the transaction or the flow of information that leads to a decision or an output. So I think that it's the best book that I've read in terms of explaining how systems fail aligned to like AI governance. And, so great job. On the
I
second
appreciate
part,
it.
on the second half of the book, though, what I thought was even just out of control is you go in and explain, aligned to that data framework you just laid out, like how you can solve the system failures.
Right.
And I think I just underlined like line after line after line after line, the second, like, I think it's from like chapter 9 on. It's just a tremendous amount of knowledge and value in that. So I would say if you're in the space, either as a decision maker, a practitioner, or just want to understand like how AI actually is impacting people. And we're going to dive into that first use case here in a second, but like this is a book that really does a great job of explaining how it breaks and where the harm really lands. And it's often, if not always, on that end user and the person who, is at the end of the decision tree. So,
Yeah,
um,
it's so interesting you mentioned that too, Brian, just because I think that was something that really surprised me when writing the book is as I was really thinking through all of these rooms that I've sat in where I'm having conversations with attorneys and the technical team and the engineering team, but also with those who are users of the systems. And you know what I think a lot of times gets missed in governance is how much of it is human based, right? It's the system breaking. We think about that, but we don't think about the system around the system breaking. We don't think about what happens when the AI does everything right, right? It does everything that it was trained to do, and there's still kind of some sort of failure at the end. And it reminds me of that quote, and it's not referring to AI models, but it says all models are wrong, but some are useful. And I think that's kind of applicable here. We could apply it to an AI model, even though it's not the intent of the quote. But there's these cases where everybody did everything right, or so they thought, and yet we still see harm on the other end of it. And so part of governance is understanding those human components and the dynamics of how do people work with systems, how do people work with people, and how do systems work with systems. And then what happens when you put all of them together in kind of this pressure cooker scenario of some of the highest risk, most regulated industries on the planet? And what happens if something breaks, right?
yeah.
And that's really what the forensic kind of reconstructions are designed to look at, because they do really, really closely resemble a lot of the rooms that I've sat in with clients and heard these stories and worked on the forensic reconstructions of them in real time, and then kind of writing them down. And hopefully what really comes across is it's not just a technology problem, right? This is a organizational structuring. It's how we handle data. It's how we handle workflows and human in the loop and all of these different things that you really get to see through these stories coming through.
The first use case is about healthcare. And I think that's something, well, it hit me really hard given some things that happened in my past with my brother, misdiagnosis. And I had to put the book down. Like, honestly, like I had to put the book down because it like really frustrated me to understand that probably what happened to my brother was a failure of information. And I'll give a little bit of the story. I haven't really been vocal about it, but um, so my brother, when he was probably like 29, I think, he was really sick and he got diagnosed with pneumonia twice. And all right, whatever, pneumonia is pretty serious, but what ended up happening is it was actually stage 4 lung cancer. And yeah, so like when we found that out, uh, it was a shock. And when I went to meet him, like one of the first things the doctor said, I'm like, how does this happen? Like, how do you go from pneumonia to
Yeah.
this
How do you miss that?
yeah, like how do you miss it? Like that seems like
Yeah.
such a and he had scans and all that stuff. And he's like, well, you know, when you're looking for horses, you don't see the zebras. And
Mhm.
that is like verbatim what was said to me. And
Wow.
the story in your book, it does such a good job of explaining how that can happen, right? There's certain parameters that are preset that should show something, but then there's all of the missing context of the information around what those parameters represent. And kind of, yeah, they sent the person home in the book. They got worse, and some people die, and some people end up needing care till the end of their life because of the misdiagnosis of just simple information exchange between people, system, people, doctors. Honestly, it's like spelled out in your book how the majority of this stuff is going to be mitigated. And I think everybody should be investing into best practices at this point because they exist. They're not as complicated as they used to be. The information's available. You get great
Yeah.
books like this, and like there's people like you and other organizations that are doing this, and there's a lot of great practitioners that can help. And I think that's one of the biggest reasons I wanted to just get like a some sort of content out there to try to catch more people and
Yeah.
inform them what the heck is in this book because it's gold. And there's 7 other use cases that like are so severely impactful to that end user. So I don't know.
Yeah, I think the healthcare one hits closest to home for a lot of people, right? Because it's where you start to think about your family. Right? I mean, you can look at the financial story and you can think about your finances and you can think about, you can kind of go through each one and maybe relate to some component of it. But healthcare is one of my favorite industries to consult in just because the potential to save life is so much higher. The potential to prevent harm is so much higher. And I think that's what a lot of organizations are kind of grappling with. And one thing I hope to bring to those conversations is just some level of nuance because people can make an argument, shouldn't a doctor review everything an AI does? And in a perfect world, maybe the answer is yes, right? But then we also have to think about the fact that doctors have very limited time. And every minute they spend reviewing the output of that AI model may mean that they're rushing a surgery, or it may mean that they're doing any number of other things not quite as well. And those are more difficult to track, right? We can track what percentage of cases is a doctor reviewing that an AI model made a preliminary assessment on, for example. But it's really hard to actually trace back what effect that ultimately has on patient lives across the board. And
Mhm.
so that is something to consider, right? Like there's a lot of trade offs that have to be made in the healthcare kind of industry. And those are difficult decisions because you're dealing with human lives. And so you see that happen. But I think, in a story that you're sharing, it's like that quote of, if you're looking for one thing, you're not seeing the other. I think that is so relevant to AI models today because AI models are trained on this particular data set of here's what we're looking for. And so, I'll give just a quick example. I've seen that play out when I was doing work on pneumonia diagnosis. We were doing vision recognition of chest X-rays using an iPhone to diagnose pneumonia, primarily in like rural and third world type countries. And what we found is that the data set of chest X-rays was not broadly applicable. That lungs looked different based on your altitude. They looked different based on where you lived. They looked different based on your age. And so we had in the United States, we had these kind of double blind, just meaning two doctors had independently reviewed and come up with the same assessment for the X-ray. We had double blind chest X-rays from the National Institute of Health to build this application. And yet that application would not function to the same level of accuracy in other countries, right? Where the X-rays actually looked different because the lungs were different to adapt to the altitude. And it's an incredible thing of the human body to be able to do that. But it also made it really challenging to develop a model that could be consistent, right? And so in that case, you kind of developing this, we're thinking we're getting really good results. We're testing it in the United States. The accuracy level is extremely high. You go and deploy it in another environment, and all of a sudden you're seeing much lower accuracy rates. And it takes you a while to kind of go, is that because they just have a more severe case? Is that because their x-rays are not quite as high quality? Is that because the doctors were late or early to the assessment, right? You're looking for everything that could be different. And what you're not thinking about is maybe the data that we used in the model is where this starts. And that's why, like, you can see in practice that layer one of the framework, like, your data governance is so critical. And so we've learned a lot, we've adapted that, and now the model is just as effective in those sort of worlds and in rural areas. But we didn't start there. And then we can also look at cases where, take COVID, something that we hadn't seen before, right? And an AI model is trained to look for things that it's seen before. And so what happens when you give it something that it's not seen? And it goes, well, it's kind of like the flu and it's kind of like this. And you have all these patients that are getting misdiagnosed just because of that. So again, it goes back to the data, right? But to your point, it's like if you're looking for one thing, you're not going to see the other. That's exactly what we see really cause so much harm in healthcare. And so that's where AI can be a huge advantage, right? In some ways, because a specialist may be looking for the thing that they're trained to look for, and an AI can look for a lot of other things as well. But at the same time, it can be a disadvantage because the AI has a limited data set too. So it's kind of a double-edged sword there, really, when you
Yeah.
kind of think about it.
So I would highly recommend the book to anybody who wants to learn a little bit more about how AI systems work. And it's not just all the technical software bits, it's the interplay between the people and the technology and the decision making, as well as the framework by which all that happens. Like, and that's your policies and your governance. And it's a very broad and complex topic to distill cleanly. And I think this has been the best I've read in terms of this makes sense to me. So I don't know what that means to anybody else, but whatever. You
No,
follow.
but I'm glad you've enjoyed it.
Yeah, no,
Really
it's good.
that was the goal.
And I wasn't joking. I got everything's underlined. Like I'm in it.
Wow, you
So
really do.
no, yeah, like I mean, this it's packed. It's packed. So like if you're trying to step into the space and
Yeah.
you want to sell it, you want to do it, like this is it's more than like a 101. It's like almost a 301, and all of your other supplemental content, that the textbook I mentioned, that's free on your website, right? Like you
Right.
have a lot of material
Yeah.
out there. I know you do.
Yeah, we have thousands, literally thousands of pages of free content that's just available. And basically, what we do is all of our own internal resources that once we get them to a point where we're really confident in them, we put them out there for free. And any company can take them and use them. It's just kind of my philosophy of how we run the company is I don't want somebody to hire us to consult on something just because we have a framework, right? Or we have this approach. What they're really hiring us for is the fact that we've sat in all of those rooms and we can see some of the issues, and apply this framework in cases that have a lot of nuance where the risk is really high. And so we put all this stuff out there for free. We don't hold really anything back. What you have is exactly the same as like what our internal team has. Right? And so the idea is take it, implement it within your own company. And we have different levels for it, right? Like we have a 1 hour video that introduces the 5 layer framework and walks through a case study, all the way up to the a 20-hour training course that's also free, to the 500-page textbook. And so we've designed it in such a way that the small businesses that are looking to roll out Copilot or ChatGPT or Anthropic, and I think you and I see those all the time, right? Like
Hmm.
we're just going to use Copilot. Those companies still have some kind of governance responsibilities, and we can give them that framework to think about it at kind of a low level, right, in terms of responsibilities. And then all the way up to the organizations it's scalable to for the largest banks and medical networks and insurance companies, kind of in the country, and beyond. And so it's designed that way. But where do people really start to understand it? It's never in the policies and the frameworks. It's always in stories. And so that's why, the book to me is something, whether people are senior governance leaders or they've never heard of governance before, but they're a little bit afraid of AI, to kind of see where is their hype, about this? Where are we overstating the risks? Where are we understating the risks? And also, like, what should you be aware of, right? When you're on the other end of it, sitting in a doctor's office and they're using AI, like, are you aware of what some of the risks might be and what you can do about them, and that type of thing. So yeah, I think the stories are a great starting point, but to your point, there's tons of additional resources for those who really want to dive deep and build a governance program within their organization.
The last thing of like, where do these risks show up? Because as a salesperson, what I'm really trying to do is find those points of value where, hey, there's a
Right.
problem there today, and tomorrow we can make that problem go away by doing X,
Mhm.
right? So they mentioned bridges, right? It's joints and connection points is where everything is the most faulty or where it breaks down first. And I see that all day long in communication. It's the game of telephone. It's it's moving information from person to person or person to system, as you mentioned. It's that handoff, that handshake. That's where these like vulnerable places are where information gets lost, context gets lost. And that's also where when I'm talking to organizations, like there's always like a movement of a thing to a thing. And that's where
Right.
challenges show up. So even as a salesperson, this stuff makes a tremendous amount of sense to me. And I'll just put a call to action because I feel like this is my new role in life is to get more salespeople selling this solution. And the solution is
Mhm.
a better way to think about and a better way to solve for systems and making sure that they're safe, that they reduce the overall harm and produce better outcomes. Right. I think
Right.
everybody can agree that they want better stuff. Like nobody's like psyched about AI sending more automated emails because nobody wants
Right.
emails. It's, hey, yeah, I want to go to the doctor. I want to pay less money and I want to trust that I'm not getting a misdiagnosis because somebody's too busy to do a thing. And
Right.
trust me, I got a ridiculous amount of anxiety. I don't trust any doctors at this point. I'm constantly bouncing around. My medical bills are way too high, but I would love because I know what's behind the scenes and like this book reinforces it. And I'm like, oh man, I really need to help. Actually, it reminds me, I mentor businesses. I want to put you in touch with one. They do cardiovascular, like end to end like risk mitigation for the patient. So I've been talking with them for a little bit through the University of Iowa mentorship program I'm part of, but I got to put you in touch with them. So
Yeah,
they're
absolutely.
good people. They're good people. So they're really trying to help, better patient outcomes. And I could go
That's
deep.
great.
I could do, maybe this is another episode, the
Yeah.
patient versus profit model of healthcare and how the
Oh,
entire
absolutely.
algorithm is aligned. Like we could dive into the UHG class action lawsuit that came
Yeah.
out. That like I go deep on these things. So yeah, maybe we
Yeah.
we get maybe we got a podcast here or at least some extra content. But
Well,
we
for
can probably
sure.
we can wrap on the book. Everyone needs to read it. If you want to understand what's going on around you, the world is driven by algorithms. There's that Pandora's box is open, and if you want to know how they work and how to protect yourself, or at least ask the right questions to inspect those joints and communication handoffs, I'd read the book. So I appreciate the time so much, Noah, and the work you do, and
Yeah, likewise.
putting all that out there for free. It's truly amazing, and we need more people like you. So hopefully, I get to meet some more. So it's been great.
Yeah. Well, likewise, I think it's great to think about it from the sales angle, right? The first point of contact with the businesses that are, you're working with these technical decision makers looking to make kind of the decisions about how to bring AI into an organization. So, super glad that even from those first conversations, they're getting to hear about governance. Great to see.
Yeah, it's one of the most important topics, and I really don't think enough people are talking about it or understand it. So
Agreed. Yeah.
there's the opportunity, salespeople.